Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. Now, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Friday, February 27th. We are on day 5 in the Kouri Richins trial. Carmen Lauber, the housekeeper and also the middle woman who got Kouri the drugs that allegedly killed Eric, is still up on cross. And I have to say, y'all, this cross-exam is a hot mess express, and it's not from Ms. Lauber. This defense attorney is all over the place. Carmen keeps getting confused, and I will tell you, everybody in chat watching live is getting confused. But let's jump in. You worked for Kouri, and Carmen said, I worked for her aunt. You did other cleaning besides her home. You cleaned the Midway mansion after Eric died. Carmen said, yes, it was for an open house. Her and 3 others were there cleaning, including her friend Nick Savage. She asked if she was there to clean graffiti. She said mainly to clean out garbage because people were squatting there. Kouri paid Nick through Venmo, and then the defense wants to talk about the check that Carmen picked up at Kouri's house, which is dated March 6th. Carmen said Kouri wrote that check that morning on the 9th. You were paid how much a piece for cleaning? Carmen and Nick got $25 an hour. And the defense says, so you cashed the check and divided it up. And Carmen said, no, Kouri sent Nick his payment through Venmo. When detectives O'Driscoll and Maynard came to interview you on March 4th, they asked if you were talking to anyone about your cooperation, and you said no. But that wasn't true, was it? You told people in detail, like Nick Savage. She doesn't remember anybody other than Nick. You had a recorded conversation with Nick about how you're going to meet with the feds and that you were nervous about meeting them. You talked in detail with Nick. Carmen doesn't remember. You said you told people you were only in for drug court violation, but you told Nick details. And you also had a tablet in jail and you were texting Nick, and she says yes. Do you remember texting him about how you can't lose your drug court? Carmen says yes. So the defense shows the text, and Carmen says, I can't lose my drug court. I've worked so effing hard to finally get clear-minded mindset. Finally, a good path and a chance to live a straight best life ever. Carmen said, yes, I've said that multiple times. May 10th, there's 3 people that come to the jail to interview you. 2 are assistant U.S. attorneys and then an agent with the government. The one who questioned you was Serena Whistler. And at this point, you have immunity from federal prosecution, but it's not completely nailed down. Do you remember the immunity letter? Carmen says she doesn't remember. They could have went to her attorney, and the defense is like, you don't remember your letter, and they move on. You said detectives O'Driscoll and Maynard aren't there, and you have to give your statement by yourself, that nobody's there to lay it out to you. She had asked if you'd talked to anyone about your cooperation. Then you tell them about your drug use, and the last time that you used was in July of 2022. Was that a true statement? Carmen doesn't remember. She said it's been years. But the defense reads that you're asked about the last time you used, and you said a little over 4 years. Did you use anyone else's urine for your drug tests? No. Defense, you realize you're under oath? Yes. You were testing positive all the way through March of 2022. Carmen points out she was due to graduate 3 months before she got arrested. Defense says that's not true. You had an order to show cause about how you figured out a way to game the system, and you figured out an algorithm to figure out when you were being tested. So you would test clean. Carmen says no. And the defense says if the prosecution in your case testifies otherwise, you're telling me you and Nick didn't figure out how to game that system? Carmen said no, it was random phone calls informing you had a drug test. In 2022, you were selling drugs to support your drug habit. No. When you were picking up pills from Robert, you were taking some out to keep? No. In a call, you talked to Nick about this, and it being the last time you would be able to get these pills. The defense wants to bring in a jail call for impeachment, so Carmen listens to it, and Nick was saying, remember, we couldn't get any more of those pills, and this, by the way, was in March of 2022. We asked Kouri if she needed more, and she didn't want more, so we couldn't. Right there, a little slip, in playing that call, you have a second person now saying that Kouri didn't want any more. Carmen said that was Nick who was wanting the pills, not her. Defense says, but Nick said we could get some. And Carmen says again, it wasn't her asking for them. And that was referring to the last time they went to the Maverick for Kouri. May 10th interview with Mrs. Whistler and the others. She asked how often you were using, and you said hardly ever, just once a month, because you really were using a lot more. Yes. You told her the other guys made it much easier because they drew it all out for me. And Mrs. Whistler is making you tell the story. You said you got pills from Susan and you fronted the money. You told them you were supposed to leave the pills in the closet in the Midway house, but instead you left them in the fire pit, and Carmen says no. You told her the first pills you got from Susan, you put pills in the fire pit, but that's not what you're saying today, and Carmen says she was doing her best to tell the truth. 1 year after the fact, your memory was probably better then than today, and Carmen says yes. The second pill purchase, which would be the first pill purchase with Robbie, you reached out because Kouri said she needed something stronger like the Michael Jackson stuff. And you weren't sure if this was by text or phone. You said, I'm not sure the officers have it all. After that, you said they made it easier for me. They fit the pieces together for me. And Ms. Whistler said to you, well, we would rather you just tell what you remember. If it seems like this is all over the place, that's because it has been all over the place. It's not me. About the Michael Jackson drug. Can that be bought from the street? And Carmen says, I don't know. I don't go around asking for it. They go into a neck surgery Carmen had where she was getting oxys from Robbie. And when she had her prescription, she turned in what she didn't use to her probation officer. Then the defense asks again, were you holding back pills from Robbie to take for yourself? No. The defense reads from a transcript of the interview Carmen had with investigators, and Carmen said Kouri never asked for fentanyl. Kouri asked her to get the Michael Jackson stuff. The defense says, we'll come back to this because she didn't want to confuse Carmen by jumping around. Well, lady, too late. We're all freaking confused. Also, Carmen testified that when Kouri asked for something much stronger, Robbie said he had fentanyl, and then she ran that by Kouri, and Kouri said to get it. Whether or not Kouri asked for it, she agreed to get the fentanyl when it was told to her that's all he had. Jeez Louise, y'all. You asked Robert for Roxy 30s, and Carmen said she asked for blues. The defense points out yesterday's testimony said she asked for Roxy 30s or blues, and Carmen's like, okay, I agree. The defense asked Carmen if she knows Kouri did not own the home in Midway in February of 2022. It was sold at the end of January 2022, and Carmen didn't know that. They show a selfie of Carmen and Susan in the car going to get that first set of pills. And the defense points out Carmen's driving on a suspended license, and Carmen said, well, Susan wanted to get high, so I drove. Defense asked about the third pill purchase, and Carmen says that the defense is confusing her, bouncing back and forth. Miss Whistler asks if you contacted Robbie a second time, and at one point, Carmen just says, you're confusing. You told Miss Whistler you asked Robbie for more of the same, and the investigator asked, you didn't ask for anything stronger? First, he got you the light green pills, and then you asked for the same. You got money for the second purchase for Robbie from the house and went back to the Maverick with Nick. Carmen said Nick was not there this time. You said more than once in your interview in May, you did a total of 3 purchases for Kouri. 1 from Susan in February and 2 times from Robbie in February and March 9th. And at that time, it was only those purchases. The defense says, I know you've changed your story, but we're talking about the 3 times. You told the U.S. Attorney's Office you bought from Susan 1 time and Robert twice. And you bought the same pills from Robert on each occasion. And then you left them at the Midway house. But you don't know who picked up the pills. You don't know if it was Kouri or Eric. And she says no. 2 days after the interview on May 12th, 2023, you called Detective Maynard asking him to come see you because you were worried about being charged federally. Carmen said that Detective Maynard was actually shocked that they were there, but she doesn't remember this conversation. Up to this point, they have been explaining to you what happened. Carmen said yes, because they had my cell phone. They told you Kouri asked for fentanyl. She said no, they told me Eric died of a fentanyl overdose. You're telling them that you're worried about possible charges, and Detective Maynard said the goal is to convict Kouri for aggravated murder and the drug investigations are not a priority. And you're saying it was easy when they put the pieces together for you? You said you were talking to your daughter and you said you just didn't even know what was happening. Finally, the judge speaks up and he says he is not sure what all this is about and to be more specific with your questions. Thank you, Judge. You speak for all of us. Do you remember you spoke with Detective Maynard and said they laid it all out? And again, the judge interrupts and said, you ask if she recalls that. Do you recall telling Detective Maynard, I talked to my daughter? No. Detective Maynard said, don't worry, we'll get you through this and you can get on with your life. On May 13th, 2023, you have another interview and they laid out the March 9th purchase. Do you remember this? And she says no. They tell you they met with Nick Bonsavage. By the way, that's a really awesome name right there. Detective Maynard and O'Driscoll met with Nick Bonsavage. And they ask if it's possible you bought 4 times and you said, absolutely not. There were only 3. And in that interview, you said, I just know totally there were only 3 total purchases. They say they're going to bring you a timeline of everything that happened. And just like today, the timeline then was confusing for you. Did they actually bring that to you? And Carmen doesn't remember if they did or not. But after this interview, they release you from custody. She said yes, she was on an ankle monitor. Was your drug court on pause because you were a cooperating witness? And she said yes. They transferred your probation to Summit County, and your new probation officer was Detective Maynard. You said yesterday you only talked to him a few times from that time in May until today. Carmen said to clarify, she has to check in with him by text daily since he is her probation officer. When asked about her drug testing, she said he drug tested her in the beginning, but it has been more than a year, maybe 2, that she hasn't had a drug test. The defense says no drug test, even though you're on probation. Carmen said is paused, so she doesn't interact with anything having to do with drug court until this case is over. However, she does go every 3 months to check in, but it's really just to set another check-in date for 3 months later. But they're waiting until the trial is over. Defense, if you testify truthfully, then you're not going to prison? And Carmen said that's correct. The state decides if you testify truthfully, there's an objection that's sustained. You ask Kouri to write the community service letters for you? Yes. You don't have a memory of what happened in February and March of 2022, do you? She says, I don't know what you mean. It's a lot to take in. Defense, you didn't remember a year after, and you really don't remember now what happened. Carmen said yes and no. Defense says, but it's been laid out for you. And Carmen says, yeah, by my cell phone data. Carmen says, I have memory. Defense, you were using and selling the whole time you were in drug court? No. Defense, Kouri never asked you for fentanyl? Carmen said, I told her that's what Robbie had, and she said to go ahead and get it. Defense, let me ask again, and she does. You bought prescriptions from Susan, light green pills from Robbie. You went back and said more of the same, and the last time was after Eric died on March 4th? Yes. So you got your big get-out-of-jail-free card. You haven't been in jail for 3 years, and you haven't had to go to drug court, and all you do is wait to see how your testimony goes. No drug testing, even though you're on probation. And you don't know what you bought from Robbie? Carmen says they were fentanyl, but I didn't sit and play around with them. You have absolutely no information about what happened to Eric aside from what you were told, and Carmen says correct. Defense, you don't know what killed Eric, and you don't know what happened that night, or if Kouri killed Eric. And she says no, and finally, we are over with Cross. I'm on a redirect. Bloodworth shows a letter to Detective Moffat that was written April 19th, 2024. This is from the government. Carmen does not remember seeing it, but it says, in exchange for her full cooperation, full transparency, and truthful testimony in the state prosecution of Kouri Richins, the U.S. agrees not to pursue federal criminal charges against Ms. Lauber relating to her sales of illicit fentanyl to Kouri Richins between January 1st and March 10th of 2022. Prosecution. Do you remember testifying you met with prosecutors a few times over the last few weeks to prepare for your testimony? And was your lawyer with you every single minute of every meeting? Yes. You were asked if you had anxiety. Have you seen a doctor recently? And she says no, but she did get a diagnosis for anxiety and was given a non-narcotic prescription. From the day you entered drug court to your arrest in 2023, did you continue to behave like an active drug addict? Carmen said occasionally she used, and an active user will lie about using. Were your lies with interviews consistent with being an active user? Yes. And you've been clean since your arrest in 2023. She says yes. She was in jail a couple of days when investigators came to tell her how Eric died. You've been clean since the day they told you Eric died of a fentanyl overdose? Yes. Has your memory become more clear as you've gotten cleaner and also had more time to process your involvement in Eric's death? And clearer since you reviewed photos, phone records, Facebook messages? Yes. Do you still get confused on dates and details between various drug buys? Yes. In the 6 to 7 interviews with O'Driscoll and Maynard, did they repeatedly stress to you their need to corroborate what you said? And did you stress to them how much you loved Eric and how he did not deserve what happened? Yes. The state. Yesterday and today it was said you could get a giant get out of jail free card. Do you remember what you said immediately after they said that? And she doesn't, so they publish a transcript. Carmen said, even if that was the case, I still felt I needed to step up and take accountability if this is what happened to Eric. In the interviews, do you think now O'Driscoll and Maynard were trying to plant things in your memory? No. Do you think they were just trying to help you recall information? Yes. He asked Carmen, did you purchase drug at Kouri's request 4 times, and did you deliver them either hand to hand or where Kouri requested 4 times? Yes. Did you testify truthfully to the best of your recollection? Yes. What happens if you don't testify truthfully? Carmen said everything would be revoked and I would go to prison for a long time. Carmen is finished for now. However, she is not released from her subpoena and she may be called back to testify. And I would venture a guess she probably will. But props to Carmen. You know, you have to look at her situation. She was an active drug user from the time she was in 6th grade. And what snapped her to reality was finding out that inadvertently her actions helped cause Eric Richins' death. And that was enough to wake her up and keep her clean. And I think the defense did a terrible job at cross, not only because it wasn't even remotely organized, it was all over the place. Everybody was confused, including Carmen, but she held her own and she regularly wiped her eyes. That woman has shown more sympathy on the stand yesterday and today for Eric than Kouri has since the day she was arrested. And I hope the jury sees that Carmen was genuine and really remorseful about what happened to Eric. But that is it for now. I will be back later on to bring you the afternoon testimony recap. Hope you have a good rest of your day. We'll see you soon.